other.
Told you it was a good thing.
Well, it can be a good thing. It's competition and not conflict, right? And the question is how to thread that.
So let me take a couple of questions from those who've joined us for lunch. I want to bring Vera in, and then maybe Bharat, do you want to come in as well? Where is Bharat? Yeah, let's bring Bharat in. So let's start with Vera. Let's go to Bharat, and then we'll come back to you. So Vera.
Thank you, Samir, and thanks to the panel. Pleasure to see you, Minister Jaishankar. I think two things that we're talking about, and you did mention it. I think the inclusion, of course, of Africa in the G20 begins to do this more multipolar world, and very important. The second thing, and we've been discussing this, and it's great that we've seen some hesitation, is this sort of global south, global north business. I think we've now agreed that we don't like that term and we should maybe find something new. I have let Ravi take that conversation. My sense is, we saw with climate change, and I fully agree with you, it's an existential threat, a little bit of a throwing out of sort of the Bretton Woods consensus, right? We all grew up in private sector, no subsidies, no all of this. And then that went out the window. And nobody seemed to protest a little bit. On the contrary, what happened is the Europeans said, oh, you have the IRA, we're going to do something too. And I think that is the multipolar world that is emerging, right? Where essentially we're saying we do need to find different solutions and different options. And we have to continue down that road, because we are certainly not going to always agree on everything. I take, for example, African continent, 2.2 trillion GDP, India, 2.5 trillion GDP. A vote comes up in the UN, we vote the same way. We get excluded from everything. India continues to be talked to. Why? Not clear to us about how some of those conversations happen. And I think the only way then that we continue to exist is that we get into a G20 or a G21. But I'd like to maybe get your views on some of this sort of, how geopolitics translates into economics and down into climate and
So the
digital.
utter neglect
Thank
of
you.
Africa from what lies ahead. I think that's a fair question to ask. Jane, can I come to you?
Well, I think we can all agree that Samir talks faster than any other human being on the planet. And I just had a wonderful experience with him in Davos. My question is about something that wasn't mentioned at all: nuclear weapons. Some countries have them, others don't. Some countries are trying to get them, others can't. Doesn't that distort any progress, whether it's multipolar, unipolar, nonpolar, or whatever?
Let me also bring Natalie in. Natalie.
So you kind of, Minister Jaishankar, you talked about the multiple divisions within the G20. And I thought it was very interesting the way in which you highlighted the fact that this was not only about Ukraine, it was about the SDGs, it was about climate. And indeed, I think, it really sort of points to the fact that the world is both more integrated, but also more fractured. It's both multipolar, but also non-polar. And I'm wondering, in terms of the effects on order that this has, does it mean that there is greater traction behind those organizations that reflect one grouping or another, as opposed to those that try to bring sort of those divides together? I mean, I think during your G20 presidency, you did an amazing job at actually holding it together. But it is very clear, on the other hand, that it seems that there are other groupings, whether it's the Quad, whether it's the BRICS, whether it's the G7, that reflect, in a sense, a certain cohesion that really seem to have more, in a sense, wind behind their sails.
Lydia, you want to come in? Short and sharp.
It was just a question regarding the American perspective, which I'm quite familiar with. I wonder if perhaps we don't think about the fourth industrial revolution and how that changes everything. And so I'd like to put the question back to say perhaps it's a bit arrogant to continue to imagine the world through great power competition when we've moved forward.
Thank you. And the final question, and then I'll come back to the panelists. I hope some of you are taking notes because I have forgotten all of them.
Thank you very much. My name is Bharat Ramanan, and I'm Director for Geopolitical Analysis at DP World. Minister Jaishankar, I just wanted to ask you, what role can India play in bridging this divide between the global south and the north? And if you don't mind peppering your answer with examples from your fascinating book, which I recommend everybody buy.
I didn't ask him to say that.
Look, let me make a pitch for Raisina. We are going to have a big discussion around his book at the end of Raisina Dialogue. So those of you who can catch a flight and come to Delhi, we'll discuss his book. But we'll still give you a chance to respond briefly to a rather expansive question asked. But let me, as we close this panel, and I'm going to come to you for your final comments at this stage, let me ask you all again that as we started, I asked you, can we come up with some tangible next steps to work together better, to make it better? And what could be one or two easy things to do as we look to use this moment and shape a new framework for the future rather than despair in what's already withered away? And to see this as the beginning rather than Armageddon. For us, it's the rebirth and the restart of a new order, and use it as that moment. What could be one or two practical advice from your vantage points on the world should be thinking about to make it happen? So let me start with you, Megan. We started with you. Let me come to you also for the final.
Sure. Thank you. So let me respond to a couple of things that were saying.
Go ahead.
And then, so first on this, isn't it arrogant to assume the world through the eyes of great power competition when we've moved beyond that? I would just say, I started out the panel by saying I saw two big dynamics in the international system. One was great power competition. The other was this rise of these middle powers. I think I would love a world where we've risen beyond great power competition, but I think the facts don't suggest we are there. And the reality is that it does affect everyone else. And I think we need to be acutely aware of that, both in terms of how we conduct this great power competition and the stakes at hand. And I'll just give an example by referring to what Vera said about the Inflation Reduction Act. So the Inflation Reduction Act, which is oddly named, but is the biggest piece of American climate legislation ever made, that was a product of great power competition. Mm-hmm. I mean, that would have never happened in the absence of the United States and China being deeply, deeply competitive with one another.
I told you it was a good thing.
It can be a good thing. It's competition and not conflict, right? And the question is how to thread that needle. So I think that it would be naive to think that we've moved to a period where that's no longer a dynamic. And as an American or as anyone, I think not taking some responsibility for that and acknowledging it, and it would be misleading. Just on what we can do, you said a few easy things. I'm going to pretend I didn't hear. I'll do one non-easy thing, but one that could be effective. I do think there is an imperative and an opportunity for how we work together, whatever names we want to give, global north, global south, on climate change, particularly when it comes to the developing world. And when we talk about climate finance, and this has come up on a couple of occasions in this panel, that working to figure out collectively, collaboratively, how the global south can actually develop in a way that it becomes part of the clean energy supply chains, rather than just, we want to provide more climate finance so you can buy more products from Europe and the West. This is more, how can we invest in these countries so that they can develop in a way...
The green transitions.
Yeah.
So IRA for the world. Let's think about that. Prime Minister Harper.
I'm not sure I have a really quick answer to...
Any responses? Africa?
Yeah, I do. Look, I think all of these big issues, climate change, global economic challenges, global peace and security, frankly, the retreat of democracy, the dysfunction within democratic societies, I think these are all huge things. And I think the first thing to fixing them or dealing with them is to stop pretending they're easy. None of these things have easy solutions. But I'm going to go to Jane's point because I think it is the single most, the issue that we are paying the least attention to, that has the absolutely worst and most immediate implications, and that has been the progressive proliferation of nuclear weapons and potentially more in the coming years. We have increasingly dangerous people with nuclear weapons capability or the potential of achieving it. And surely this is something that from the littlest powers to the greatest powers, it is all in our interest to deal with and to preclude really bad outcomes as fast as we can.
Thank you, Prime Minister Harper. I'm sure you are not referring to the United States when you mention dangerous people with nuclear weapons. Vice President.
Well, thank you. If we agree that one needs to look at complex problems in a complex manner, my suggestion would be to renew our language. Because the language is inviting us to see the world in a polarized manner. For me, Global South make no sense. None whatsoever. Global North, non plus. So also this idea that you can have big, medium, small, I think it's just a return to something that we tried to get rid of, which was first, second, third world, which made no sense either. And again, if I may return to my initial point, technology is a big equalizer because it enables nations to do things that would otherwise have taken decade after decade after decade. It enables, the extraction of corruption in your systems when you use digital tools for trade. You can provide health services for so many more people. You can provide financial services for so many more people. But my first suggestion would be to reinvent the language in which we speak about the world, because I think it's really not helping us. And I also think it's not helping us in how we include countries on the African continent so much more. Because for me, it doesn't make any sense either to speak about Africa. It's countries. It's so much more. There's so much more potential. There are so many differences there. And we do not grasp it if we do not take that on board. And then we need to look further, and that would be my second suggestion, as to how we reform our international financial order. Because it goes back to a time where things were very different, and it does not serve us well today. And that, I think, would help us do a number of the things that we would want to do, and also be more equalizing.